Hey guys, it's Zach. So today I wanted to show you basically the difference between color correction and color grading, and basically how you should be using both. So look, let's just get straight into Premiere Pro. I want to show you now. Right, so what I've done is I've just added in just the 4 clips of footage from a short film that I am editing. Now it's shot a really flat profile, which basically just means that there'll be more dynamic range when you can get to editing and color grading and color correction. So this was shot on a mirror. Assuming that you shoot in flat or Vlog or S-Log or whatever you shoot in, it's gonna come in and it's all gonna be very nice and flat. So once you've edited the footage and it becomes a film that you want it to be, it's now time to color correct. So before you start adding any kind of color that will create an emotion for the film, you have to basically make sure it's all the same and consistent across the entire length of the film. This means going to each individual clip and adjusting some levels and hues and all that sort of stuff to basically level it all out. So it's like all a blank canvas ready to then add on a color, which will make it pop and look really cool. And the reason you do this, which I'll show you right now, is because let's say you're shooting outside over the course of the day. Any shots that you get in the morning is going to be different to the evening, and then that's also going to be different to midday. So going into now Premiere Pro, it was shot over the course of a day. This is a perfect example by the seaside, so the sun was in different places. This was shot here with basically the beach. Lovely place, by the way, Seaford, if you ever go in England, south of England, lovely. This was shot basically first thing in the morning. There wasn't that much sun because it was coming up basically behind us. Then the close-up shot of Rachel here was done around like 11 AM, so the sun is fairly high in the sky. This shot was about 1 PM. Again, the sun now is a bit further, coming up just basically in front of us. This shot was done the next day, very early in the morning, so the sun wasn't there. So you can see how these are going to become an issue. So what you want to do is you want to either, depending on your version of Premiere Pro, click the color tab, which will bring you into my obviously version of color. So obviously you have basic correction. I kind of actually just like to do this. So I'm going to bring this back here. I don't really need the source at the moment. You have creative, color correction, you have your curves over here, color wheels, all this nice stuff, you know, vignetting, or if you don't have the color tab, I'm gonna go back to editing, you can just drag over Lumetri color. Now, quickly, first thing you want to do is you want to go to your project and you want to add an adjustment layer. Obviously you want it to match the source of the video that's in there. The reason you want to add an adjustment layer, I would just put it over the entire thing like this, and then you can kind of go in and just make the cuts. Whenever you're correcting and grading, you want to do it to an adjustment layer. You don't want to do it to the raw footage. Couple reasons. Number one, if let's say you make crazy changes to the adjustment layer, which I'll do super quickly just to show you. So if I then go into effects, but this is just an example. So I wanted to make it like really blue, I want the exposure to be really high and like low, like loads of contrast. Okay, cool. Let's just say for whatever reason that's done. You know, I wanted to have like a beachy Hoth feel. It's really like, don't do this. Anyway, if you then wanted to show like the before and after, if you did it to the original footage, you're gonna have to go back and then edit all of like the temperature and the exposure and everything you did. Or you could just click the toggle on and off of the eye and then you can kind of see, okay, that's what it looked like before, that's what it looks like now, okay, cool. And another good thing about doing this is, let's say if you want to have 2 different styles, you can kind of like go back between this one and then let's say this one I'm gonna change actually. So this one I'm gonna do all the way this way. So you can look at that one and say, yeah, I kind of like the orange, or do I like the blue? You know, I mean, I actually don't like any of them. Okay, so that's why you want to edit it on an adjustment layer. And also, you know, like they say you're editing and then your client says, actually, yeah, I mean, I don't really like any of that. Just send me the version of all the raw footage. And if you've done loads of correcting of each individual scene or like frame, it's going to take you ages to correct all that back. So just do it on an adjustment layer and then you can turn it on and off. You can toggle it on and off whenever you want. So now I'm gonna, again, I can either click the color tab or can just drag a Lumetri color effect basically onto the adjustment layer. It then comes into your effects panel. Now, I personally don't like to edit on here just because it's too small. I have to like push everything down. But even when I'm using dual monitors, I like just to use a color tab, just because I get a bit more room to mess with everything. So now, first of all, I like to use Lumetri scopes. I'm not going to go into too much detail about this because there really isn't any need. All I will say is that obviously this is your reds and your greens and your blue, so RGB. If I was going to move this all the way up there, you can see the blue goes up. And then if I move this all the way here, the red goes up. Same thing, green, red and blue. By the way, quick tip, if you just double click onto the lines of any changes you make. Let's say if you did that and you just double click, it just brings it back to 0 rather than trying to have to like find where the 0 is. Just double click. Same goes for any curves. If you make some like wild changes here, if you just like double click, it goes back. Okay, the best way to correct is just to kind of make these all line up with each other, and then for them to spread as far apart as possible. So basically that means that you'll have the highest amount of like blues near like just above 90 and basically just below 10. You don't want it to be crashing at the top. That means there's too much of whatever color that is. Now this bit's up to you. You can either go to basic correction and do it through here, or you can go to your curves. I personally like using my curves. However, if you're going to do correction, you know, right now I can kind of see that the blue at the moment is actually a bit higher than the green and the red. So I can actually bring this down a tiny bit. Like even that is actually might be fine. And then you can then bring the green up slightly to even it. Sweet. Overall, you kind of want this to come up a little bit because now it's in the middle, which is good, kind of between like 40 and 60, as you can see here. You want to add a bit more contrast there because that basically widens the red and the blues and the greens with the highlights. So highlights and whites, people kind of get these like mixed up, or they think they're the same or whatever. Highlights is just a detail in your footage. Whites and the blacks, obviously the actual white in the footage and the blacks in the footage. So a lot of cinematic looks have the highlights really, really low, and that is because the detail, they want as much detail in there as possible. If I drag this all the way down, obviously it's going to get darker, but there'll be more detail. You'll see this as a better example in anything which is very sunny. If the sun's in there, it will all be washed out if it's higher, and then if you bring it all the way down, you'll probably see like the actual outline of the sun. It's that sort of thing. Another tip is if you wanted to bring the highlights even further down, obviously you can't drag it all the way there, so you just drag it onto the number and it'll take you down to 150. Same goes with the shadows, and you can bring that all the way up to 150. So I'm just going to kind of bring this down to about here. I kind of want like a lot of detail there. Shadows wise down a bit because I like what's kind of going on here. Now, obviously I've moved the highlights down. I'm going to move the whites back up. There we go. And then the actual blacks, I want the blacks to remain black, if that makes sense. So I'm just going to move this down there. Then again, you can here at the moment, you can mess with the saturation if you want. It was shot flat, so if I push this up to like, again, go to extreme, I'm going to push it back to like there, not too much, about 115. Sweet. So this is without going into any like the creative and the curves. You can kind of see already like we're getting more normal to what it would have looked like in real life. All this stuff I'm just doing very quickly, just so I can show you. And then again, you can now do what all the kids like to do these days and kind of bring up this part of the shadows, but then make it a little bit more dark, and then kind of bring this up, so make a nice S. There we go, nice. And now you can kind of have another look. You can kind of see the greens need to be a bit higher. So I would actually, and a bit lower as well. So I'm just going to bring the greens up there a bit more, and then bring this down just a tad. Maybe just bring this a little higher. Nice. So now we're actually kind of getting there. You see, boom, boom, boom. Right, I'm not going to go into any more detail. You kind of get the idea that I'm doing. Hopefully, if I can spread these out as much as possible. Now, what you could do is kind of get, at least rough anyway, a much better way to start with. If I then move this over to here, you can kind of see like, again, this isn't perfect because it's like, what's going on over here? But it's easy now to adjust this than to have to adjust it from all complete flat again. So right now I can kind of see here the greens are crashing too much, and that's just because I added a lot more greens, so I can actually just do this. Stop that from crashing. Now, this is a better way to explain lumetri scopes. These big jagged lines here are basically Rachel's face. These not so jagged lines is just basically this outline, this nice bokeh area here. So I'm going to bring these up here. Sure. Maybe even a little bit more. So about to like there. So just after 10, and then I can bring the shadows down a bit more, probably to about there, and then bring this up a little bit, just a tiny bit at a time. Nice. Okay. I can see at the moment that blue, either the red and the green are too high or the blue's too low, but that's to do with the white balance. So I can actually come back into the correction, and I can bring this. There you go. That's a bit better. Now that's actually really where it should be best, for like really cold. But again, this is probably because of where the sun was when this particular scene was shot. So I don't want to go too crazy at the moment. And probably bring this down to there. Okay, I think exposure wise, I think we're pretty good. I'm going to bring it down, tone it down a little bit more. Move the highlights. Yeah, whenever you're doing stuff on the face, you want to obviously have a lot more detail in there. So that's when you can start bringing the highlights like really far down. But basically, look, I'm not going to do this for every single shot. You kind of just see like what I'm doing. So the reason you want to do something like this, and then if I move this to here now, this is just so when we go from this shot to like this shot, this is where you can see the difference. If you look at the Davinci scopes, keep your eyes on here. If I move this here and then, you can see it's just like wildly different. There's far too much blue going on here compared to there. And everything's like way higher. So like right now, I can actually just bring this like all the way down. Doesn't need to be that high. The contrast probably doesn't need to be that much at the moment. The blue's like far too blue. Let's even that out and then bring the green up a tiny bit. There we go. So that's getting there a little bit more. Obviously, want to bring the highlights down. The whites don't need to be as high, I don't think. I could bring the exposure up a little bit, but the whites, like that's like quite nice just because where we're at. Now that we're going from here to here, there's just a little bit more of a balance. Now, this doesn't mean that this shot, all of here, all of these RGB colors are going to be the same, but it just means they're all balanced. So it's not going to be as freaky when we start to add like some cool grading onto here. So now what you want to do is go back to your project, get the adjustment layer again. I'm going to bring an adjustment layer now. I'm going to bring it over everything. Okay. Now the reason I'm going to do that is because this is where I'm going to add my grading. So this is where I want to get like that feel for whatever. The good thing about this is I don't have to do this in the color if I don't want to. I can kind of just go to the effect control. Boom. Get rid of that. Sure. Add Lumetri color onto here. Nice, done. Now this is where all your LUTs are gonna live. They can actually live also if you want them to in the input LUT, the basic correction. I'll show you in another video how you can basically download LUTs for free or pay ones and then put them into Premiere Pro so you don't have to keep browsing for them. So there's one called Saving Private Ryan. Okay, so obviously at the moment it's like it's coming on really hot, like far too hot. So I'm gonna immediately put this down to 50% just because I still even think this is actually coming up a little bit too harsh. I'm going to put this down to like 35, maybe bring it up to like 40. Okay, again, this is why I do it as an adjustment layer so I can toggle it on and off and I can be like, yeah, I kind of like what we're doing. Let's go over to here, let's just toggle this off. Like that's kind of nice, but then bring it down there a little bit more dark. So this is why we do the color correction before. So if I turn this off, it's still like really flat. It's too flat. There's not enough contrast there. It's all kind of blending into each other. If I bring this back down to 40 and then toggle this back on, you can kind of see this look that we're going for. So if I go over to color and then go to Lumetri scopes, it's off, on. So you can see like the changes aren't that much. Whenever you're adding a lot, you don't want it to go in super hot unless that's the look you're going for. But I'm obviously just trying to do something which looks like real and proper. But I don't want them to be sitting there thinking like the color of this is just messed up. Like it's like when you're watching The Matrix, you don't really realize until you start like reading about it or whatever, and he's like, oh, everything's actually green, like everything is green, and it fits so well, but you don't really notice it as you're watching. That's not the first thing that comes to your mind. So that's why I don't want to come in super hot with the creative and it be like just ridiculous. I could change this and I could say, let's say if I wanted to have a dark one, and let's bring that up to 100 because this is black and white. So I wanted to have like let's call it like a mid to late 50s. So it basically means that it's going to be black and white, but it's not going to be that much contrast. It's actually going to be kind of like flat. This is more basically gray and white, I would say. It's more grayscale, if anything. You know, go to Furiosa, which basically comes from Mad Max, kind of inspired. Doesn't exactly fit this at the moment, but can you kind of see how dark the blacks are, and then how everything's very like a orangey, misty color kind of going on. But this is why it's so important to correct, because now that we have that white canvas, we can kind of use whatever color we want on top. If I turn this off, again, it's just coming on a little bit too flat and a bit boring. But we have the necessary contrast in there. We have the levels all matching up with each other. We have every scene matches with the one before it and the one after, so it looks consistent and it looks clean. So whenever you add a grade and you add a nice color, it's all going to both match and fit nicely and just run smooth and epic and lush. So that is the difference between color correction and color grading. You have to have one for the other. If you're making a vlog, you don't actually have to add a LUT on top of it. There's no need, but always make sure you correct the footage before. If you're shooting in a flat profile, it's pretty much critical that you do that. You know, any phone, any point and shoot, any like DSLR that you're shooting in a natural or normal setting, you won't have to do the color correction because it does it all for you in-house, as it were. If you are filming in a flat profile like Vlog or Cine D or S-Log, anything like that, make sure you correct the footage first, and that's why you do it. So when you shoot across the day, it gives you a flat profile where you can correct everything and it looks amazing. Super long video again. I really look forward to seeing you in the next video. You can like, subscribe, do whatever you want. I'm not going to ask you to do it. And I'll see you around in the next video. Thanks for watching.